Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Max Njai. I'm the manager of the syndication and co-financing division at the African Development Bank. I would like to welcome you to the bank's webinar for the Japanese private sector on doing business in Africa. As you may know, during TCAT 7 last year in Japan, the bank and Japan signed what we call the EPSA 4 agreement, the Enhanced Private Sector Assistance Program, which entails that the bank and Japan will provide financing up to 3.5 billion. Japan has been an outstanding partner for the bank in terms from the public sector side. And this seminar is to ensure that we bring the private sector, the Japanese private sector, into doing business in Africa. As you know, Africa is the fastest growing continent outside of Asia. And as you also know, the COVID-19 has had its effect, and although it is a difficult time for all continents, at the same time, it is a great opportunity to ensure that private sector is an investment from Japanese private sector is enhanced in Africa. So the objective of this seminar is threefold. One is to deepen the understanding of the role of the African Development Bank and the private sector involvement in doing business in Africa. Second, we would like to disseminate the purpose outline of the EPSA and to present to you as well what the bank can do. How can the bank assist you in bringing Japanese business into the private sector investment in Africa? And third, of course, we need to encourage the private sector to identify business opportunities through EPSA, but at the same time through our private sector window. Today, my role is to moderate the session and to just run you very quickly on the program. Initially, we will have our Director of Syndication, Samuel Mugoya, provide opening remarks, followed by Mr. Mimura from the Director General of the International Bureau, Ministry of Finance, also provide opening remarks. Mr. Hanijiri, who's our Director of Asian External Representation Office, will give a brief overview of the African Development Bank before we engage on the presentation of EPSA, of the private sector window, and the financial products of the bank, without, of course, forgetting opportunities in the energy sector. And before we close the session, we will have the honor to have the Deputy Director of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation provide closing remarks, and this will follow by a Q&A. Without any further ado, let me ask Mr. Mugoya to provide his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. Good afternoon, colleagues in Abidjan. Good morning, colleagues in Abidjan. Good afternoon, our participants in Japan. Excellencies, honorable guests, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Samuel Mugoya, as I was introduced by my colleague Max. I'm the Director of Syndications, Co-Financing and Client Solutions at the African Development Bank Group. It is my privilege and honor on behalf of the bank to welcome you to today's webinar for the Japanese private sector on doing business in Africa. The role of the private sector, as we all know, is critical to economic growth and development in our continent. And this was recognized at the 7th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, otherwise known as TCAT 7, held in Japan in August 2019. During this TCAT 7, the bank and Japan, as mentioned by my colleague Max, announced a 3.5 billion funding target under the 4th phase of the EPSA initiative to spur private sector-led economic growth in Africa. I would like to sincerely thank the Minister of Finance of Japan for this commendable support to the bank. As mentioned earlier by my colleague, EPSA offers an excellent opportunity for Japanese companies to do business in Africa through equity investments and project finance loans. A recent example being the Ghana Cocoa Board syndicated loan, $600 million syndicated loan that was financed by a number of lenders, including the African Development Bank and the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. Proceeds of this loan will support the scaling up of the cocoa value chain in Ghana and help ensure higher incomes for farmers in Ghana, which incidentally supplies 70% of all the cocoa beans imported into Japan. The bank is closely working with Japan in other projects under this EPSA framework, notably the $20 billion Mozambique LNG Area 1 project, today ranked as Africa's single largest foreign direct investment to date. The project is co-financed by more than 20 financial institutions, including the bank, of course, and the Japan Bank for International Cooperation, otherwise known as JOBIC. Under this project as well, Nippon Export and Investment Insurance, NEXI, will ensure co-financing loans provided by Japanese private sector, private financial institutions. So you can see it's one of those projects that brings together Japan and the bank in a very strong partnership. This project is a win-win partnership between Mozambique and Japan, as Japanese utility companies are expected to offtake approximately 30% of the LNG produced by this project. Before I hand over to Mimura-san, Minister of Finance Japan, who is here with us, I'd like to thank you for participating in this webinar. Arigatou gozaimashita. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mugoya. Now let me ask Mr. Mimura, Deputy Director General of the International Bureau, Minister of Finance, Japan, to provide his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. Thank you very much, Max, and hello, everybody. As was just introduced by Max very kindly, my name is Atsushi Mimura, Deputy Director General in charge of international affairs at the Japanese Ministry of Finance, and I'm now working as the African Development Bank Deputy representing the Japanese government. Thank you very much for organizing all this meeting. I'm sorry, but as this is mainly a webinar, mainly for giving opportunities to people from the Japanese private sector to better know about what the African Development Bank is doing, let me just make my opening remark from now on in Japanese. And I'm very sorry for non-Japanese speakers, especially those colleagues joining from Abidjan, but let me make my opening remark in Japanese. 先ほどご紹介に預かりました財務省国際局で、担当の審議官をしております三村と申します。本日は皆様方多くの日本の民間の皆様方にこのウェビナーにご参加をいただきまして私どもとしても大変喜ばしいというふうに思っているところでございます。残念ながらコロナということでありましたので今回ウェビナーというような形での開催にはなりましたけれどもその良い副産物といいますか結果としてアビジャンにあるこのアフリカ開発銀行の本部からも今まさに先ほどのお話もお聞きいただきましたようにたくさんの幹部の方あるいは担当の方にご参加をいただけることになりましたのでそういう意味では本日は日本の皆様方に直接このアフリカ開発銀行の本部の幹部の皆様方からいろんなお話を直接聞いていただける大変良い機会になったのではないかと思っております。先ほどサミュエルさんのお話にもありましたようにTICADなどもあって日本ずっとこのアフリカとの関係強化努めてきたわけでございますけれども当然このアフリカ開発銀行はアフリカを担当する代表する開発金融機関ということでこのアフリカ開発銀行日本にとっても非常に重要なパートナーということでこれまでも密接な関係を構築してきたところでございます。当然数年に一度行われますこの低所得国向けのこのアフリカ開発基金の増資なども日本はメインの増資国出資国の一つとしてずっとご協力を申し上げてきたわけでありますけれどもそういったアフリカ開発銀行と日本とのこの伝統的な良好な関係のいわば象徴としまして 後ほど花尻所長からご挨拶をいただけると思いますけれども、東京にはアフリカ開発銀行のこのアジア代表事務所というものがあるわけでございます。これ実はアフリカ開発銀行がアフリカ地域外で持っております代表事務所といいますものが実は唯一ということでございまして、このことをとらまえましても我々とアフリカ開発銀行とのこの、深い関係が、ここにも象徴されておるということでありまして、本日のこのウェビナーの開催にあたりましても花尻所長をはじめこの思っております。先ほどらEPSA4 といったものに皆様から言及をいただいておりますけれども、まさしく日本政府、ここ十数年にわたってですね、このEPSAというもので、このアフリカ開発銀行との共同でのイニシアチブ、これはJICA を使った円借款、それからいろんな形での技術協力、こういったもので、質の高いインフラをはじめとしたですね、アフリカ開発銀行とのさまざまな開発の取り組みを、日本とアフリカ開発銀行、JICA の枠組みを使って手を携えてやっていくというものでありますけれども、こういったものが年々、実績が積み重なり、歴史を積み重ねてきているというところでございます。それから JBIC の方、こちらも本日のウェビナーでも後ほどJBIC 林副総裁からもお話があるというふうに承知をしておりますけれども、このEPSA でやってきました JICA に加えまして、さらにやはりこの JBIC で一層この民間の投資の拡大をやっていただくということが、この、本日このウェビナーにご参加の日本の皆様方にも非常に重要だろうということで、この JBIC、それからアフリカ開発銀行の特にこの民間融資の部門での協力というものを日本としては積極的に財務省としてもこれ推進してきた、政府としても推進をしてきたところでございます。その結果、これも先ほどサミュエルさんからもご紹介いただいたような、例えばこのモザンビークのですね、この LNG 案件でございますとか、こういった非常にアフリカにとっても、また日本のビジネスにとっても非常に重要だ、そういった具体的な案件という成果というものが出てきておりますので、我々としてはこのEPSAの取り組みとともにこの JBIC を使った取り組みといいますものが今後一層大きな実を結んでいくことを大きく期待をしているというところでございます。そういう意味で本日日本の民間いろんな方からご参考いただきまして大変にありがたいと思っておりますけれども、今申し上げましたようなこの長年のアフリカ開発銀行と日本とのこの協力関係に基づいてJICA ですとか JBIC、 こういったもの、日本の皆様にとっても非常に馴染みの深いパートナーもいわば巻き込ませていただいた形でこれから一層このさまざまな協力関係広がっていくというこういう段階でございますので、ぜひこういったものを使って日本の本日ご参加の民間部門の皆様方にも皆様方のアフリカでのビジネスの足がかりにしていただくとともに、それがひいてはアフリカの皆さんのさらなる、開発あるいは経済生活の社会の向上につながっていくという文字通りウィンウィンのものがどんどんできていくことを我々としても大変期待をしているところでございます。そして当然そこにあたっては先ほどもご紹介申し上げたアフリカ開発銀行のアジア代表事務所もですね、おそらく皆様方にとっても大変に良い東京にあるそういう意味ではコンタクトの窓口ということにもなろうかと思う次第でございます。先ほどお話もありました日本としてもこのアフリカ文字通りこの人口構成とかも若いですし資源などもありますし、これから非常に大きな可能性を秘めた大陸だと思っております。また先般アフリカ開発銀行選挙もありまして私の総裁第2期目にも入られたという中でですね、我々として一層アフリカ開発銀行と手を携えてアフリカの開発協力をさせていただくとともにひいてはそれがまた日本の皆様方のビジネスにもつながっていくことを切望しておりますので、本日のこのウェビナーがそういった良い機会になることをお祈り申し上げてございます。長くなりまして恐縮ですけれども、私から以上であります。ありがとうございます。Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mimura, for those opening remarks. Can I ask Mr. Hanijeri to provide a quick overview of the African Development Bank Group, please?
Thank you very much, Max-san and Yoshi-san. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining our webinar. I'm Takashi Hanajiri, head of the Asia External Representation Office of the AfDB. Honored and delighted to make a presentation here. Allow me to switch to Japanese. Those who are not so familiar with the language, please note English translation is available on Zoom。私からアフリカ会議とアジア事務所の概要等につき、簡潔にご説明いたします。Next, please. Could you move on to next? Yes, thank you. アフリカ会議の概要です。並行の設立は前回の東京オリンピックの年、1964年。業務目的はアフリカ域内加盟国の持続的な経済開発及び社会発展の促進。開発の優先分野はハイファイブズに集約されます。これら5分野の目標達成でアフリカの SDGs の 90% 以上を達成できるとされます。社会的責任投資の観点で、並行のアフリカ開発銀行債をご購入くださることは効果的な選択肢と考えます。先月の年次総会でアデシナ総裁が日本国を含め全81加盟国の 100% の投票で再任されました。ありがとうございます。Next, please. アジア代表事務所につき申し上げます。弊事務所は先ほど三村審議官よりお話しあったとおり、2012年にできた現状並行にとり唯一のアフリカの外の事務所です。とても小さな、しかし中国、インド、日本、韓国というアジア株主国、アフリカ大陸の2倍の人口をカバーしております。アジアの4つの株主国の皆様方には、国際会議、信託基金、共同スキーム、年次総会開催等、大きなご貢献を賜り、深く感謝いたしております。日本の皆様、弊事務所のウェブサイトをぜひお尋ねください。並行アフリカ大陸のビジネス機会の情報をたくさん提供しております。インターネット検索でアフリカ開発銀行と日本語で入力いただければ、弊事務所のウェブサイトに到達できます。Next, please. 並行と日本との多様な協力関係につき、今回概観する資料をこしらえてみましたところ、詳しくなりすぎました。後日、弊事務所のウェブサイトに掲載いたします。民間セクター開発のための共同イニシアティブ、EPSA。1993年以降、アフリカへの流れに先鞭をつけてくださったアフリカ開発会議、TICAD。日本アフリカドリーム奨学金プログラム、JATS、ADF、それから、ジェネラルキャピタルインクリーズなど深く感謝申し上げます。Next, please. 後ほど同僚たちが並行のフィナンシャルプロダクツと関係情報につきご説明いたします。私からここでは世界の民間セクターをアフリカへと移るするユニークな投資融資ビジネスのプラットフォーム、アフリカ投資フォーラムをご紹介いたします。アフリカには民間投資が必要です。一例はインフラ需要。アフリカのインフラ投資に必要な資金の1年分の不足分は670から1070億ドルと並行は推計しております。この膨大な投資を大陸へと呼び込むため、アフリカ会議は2018年、全く新しいプラットフォーム AIF を立ち上げました。単なる数日間のイベントではありません。年間を通じたデジタルプラットフォームです。4つの柱がございます。第1に案件のスポンサーや投資家をつなぐプラットフォーム。第2に関係者が案件に強く関与くださるよう促すマーケットプレイス。第3に案件クローズを強く進めるマーケットデイズ。第4に案件の進捗をフォロー、状況を報告するディールトラッカーがあります。Next, please. マーケットデイズのご紹介です。最初は2018年、2回目は19年、ともに11月に南アフリカ・ヨハネスブルグで開かれました。さまざまなイベントが多様な参加者、投資家、スポンサー、コントラクター、政策立案者、政府の方々を結びつけネットワークを構築いただくため開催されます。昨年の主な成果本スライドをご参照ください。現状最大の案件は先ほどもお話が出たモザンビークの LNG プロジェクト、JBIC 様、NEXI 様、など日本の、そして各国の公的機関、アジアの、そして日本の民間企業にご参加いただいています。AIF は年々世界の関心を集めておりますが、日本の方々により一層投資融資ビジネスをしていただきたいと強く望んでおります。AIF ウェブサイトをぜひお尋ねください。本年の AIF に関し、次回の AIF に関し、適切な開催の形など現在検討中で、正式決定がなされ次第、ウェブにて発表いたします。Next, please. 新型コロナウイルスの影響と対応です。並行はアフリカ経済見通し AEO を毎年公表しますが、本年は7月初、補足サプリメントを追加公表。新型コロナウイルスのパンデミックの影響を踏まえ、予測を改定しました。14日にウェビナーも行っております。アフリカの成長は21年には 3% への回復が見込まれます。これは各国政府がウイルスの感染率を管理し、抑えるとの前提のもとです。短中期の回復見通しは依然不確定です。 経済に対する向かい風要因は当然ございます。しかし、いくつかの追い風要因もまた、アフリカの危機への強靭性と経済回復への見通し等を強化する要素としてございます。保健セクター、工業化、デジタル革命、エネルギー需要の回復、それからパンデミック自体により、生まれたインフラ需要などです。これらアジアの、そして日本の産業界にとり大きな機会でもあります。サプリメントのメッセージは2つ。1つは即時の政策対応の必要性。第2に、世界的感染拡大で4900万人のアフリカの人々が極度の貧困へと追加的に追いやられる可能性です。並行は主に3つの対応を行っています。紙面の関係でここでは3つ目のみ書いております。第1が記録的規模30億米ドルの COVID-19 と戦うソーシャルボンドの記載。第2が COVID-19 への WHO の対応を支援する200万米ドルの緊急の無償資金協力。第3がここに書いております。アフリカの各国と民間企業とを新型コロナウイルスの影響から守る新型コロナウイルス感染症即応ファシリティです。現在、理事会承認を得て、多くが有志実行済み、残りも有志実行がなされつつあります。Next, last slide, please. 以上の日本語資料は英語の製本からの仮訳であることをご承知ください。並行にご興味を持ってくださった方は、10月、来月にビジネスオポチュニティセミナーを予定しており、ご参加をお勧めいたします。詳しくは近日に弊事務所のウェブサイトでお知らせいたします。ぜひアジア代表事務所の日本語ウェブサイトをお尋ねください。以上です。ご清聴ありがとうございました。That's it. Thank you very much. Over from me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much, Mr. Hanijeri, for this very good overview of the African Development Bank Group. Now, let me ask Mr. Barry, who's the Chief Co-Financing Officer in the Syndication and Co-Financing Division, to give a brief presentation on EPSA in general. Mr. Barry?
Thank you very much, Max. Good morning, everybody. Hello, gozaimasu, Japan participant. My name is Mamadou Barry, Chief Co-Financing Officer at FISA Department, who is in charge of EPSA. My communication will focus on the following points. Okay, I think that my communication will focus on these following points. What does EPSA mean? The basic information about ACFA, special features on EPSA, and the conclusions. In this part, I will briefly talk about the different phases of EPSA and tell you about the main component of EPSA. I mean, the Accelerated Co-Financing Facility for Africa, the Private Sector Investment Finance, the Fund for Private Sector Assistance, and the Non Sovereign Loan. What is EPSA? EPSA can be defined as the framework for resource mobilization and development partnership between African Development Bank and the government of Japan, and it is implemented by JICA from Japan side and the FISTA department on the bank side. This partnership framework started in 2005 and provides generous financial support to its implementation. We have here, chronologically, the different EPSA phases since it starts. In the first phase, the government of Japan contributes $1 billion US. And the phase, Japan doubled its contribution with $2 billion US. And from the third phase, the two parties, the African Development Bank and the government of Japan, have agreed to reach joint target co-financing for $3 billion US. And on the first phase, which starts this year until 2022, the joint target for co-financing is $3.5 billion US, with the establishment of a new co-financing facility called Private Sector Investment Fund. Here we present now the different EPSA components. The first one is the Accelerated Co-Financing Facility for Africa, named ACFA. ACFA facility is one of the major components of EPSA and allows co-financing with the Bank of Sovereign Operations. ACFA project can be implemented either joint co-financing or in parallel. And in case of joint co-financing, The bank is the lender's agent, and for the implementation, we use the bank procedures. Given JICA's preferential terms and conditions, ACFA projects maximize allocation for the ADBs, the ADF countries, African Development Fund countries. And as you can see here various projects implemented with this co-financing facility in different regions in Africa, Senegal for Western Africa, Cameroon for Central, we have Uganda for East, Mozambique in the south, Morocco in the north of Africa. The other component is what we call the private sector investment finance, PSIF. With this newly signed EPSA 4, we have an emphasis on the African private sector with the inclusion of the PSIF. We can say that PSIF will allow EPSA to provide finance to non-sovereign operation projects through the financial structures with the bank, such as a syndicated loan. PSIF provide debt and equity, and focus for the debt, they focus on the corporate loan, the project finance, and financial institution. And for the equity, it's the private equity or fund investment. So I say that, as I told you, PSI provide debt and equity funding at concessional rate, bankable project with development impact, in particular for the SDGs achievement, the climate change, or the quality infrastructure. Here we have the terms and conditions of the debt and after the equity. Given the terms and the conditions of this facility, as you can see, the amount is between 10 million to 150 million, and the tenor up to 20 years with 5 years grace period. You can say that the PSIF will play an important role of financing for the private sector in Africa, which needs long resources for its investment. The bank has already concluded a syndication transaction with this facility for one project in Ghana. Here you have the terms and conditions for the equity, maximum of 25% of total capital, and the exit strategy around 5 and 7 years. The PSIF is managed by directly by JICA. And if you need to have more information, you can contact the PSIF department at JICA headquarters. Another component is the FAPA. FAPA, this is the fund. This fund is the grant, whose purpose is to finance technical assistance, capacity building, and pre-investment activities with the framework of the projects the bank carry out. This fund is managed by the FAPA Secretariat hosted at FIS department. The main contributors are the government of Japan, the bank, and the government of Australia. To date, we have financed 82 projects totaling $66 million. The other component is the non-sovereign loan. The non-sovereign loan is a line of credit from JICA to the bank on concessional terms for financing the bank's private sector operation. And for each loan agreement we have with the bank, with JICA, the bank proposed project to JICA, which they approve. To date, we have had 7 non-sovereign loans with JICA, and an 8th non-sovereign loan is being negotiated with JICA. You can see here, the project funded with this NSL, and which concern different sectors and countries. Okay, let me talk about the basic information about the ACFA. Is one of the major components of the EPSA. Given the importance of ACFA, this facility will help regarding we have this facility with the main component of ACFA to co-finance with the bank. Regarding the eligibility criteria, in principle, all the bank regional member countries are eligible. But the countries which face to the debt sustainability are hardly eligible by the Japanese government. Okay, we have two types of co-financing with JICA. We have joint co-financing or parallel co-financing. According to the agreement between JICA and the bank, ACFA project can be implemented either jointly or in parallel. In case of joint co-financing, the bank is appointed as lender's agent, and we use the bank procedure in terms of procurement, supervision, disbursement, ex post evaluation if it is conducted. And for the service that the bank provides, JICA pays some amount to the bank. If it is a parallel co-financing, each one uses his own procedures. Here we have the terms and conditions of JICA loan, and depend on the classification of the countries. As low-income list development countries, low middle income countries, upper middle income countries. But there is just a general condition, but each borrower negotiates directly with JICA this loan agreement with the term and conditions. However, we can say in general that these conditions are very interesting for ADF countries, for which IMF suggests taking concessional loans. For the EPSA phase, ACFA project will focus on infrastructure development and also policy loan to improve the business environment. With the new PSIF facility, we will also try to co-finance as much as possible our non-sovereign operation with JICA. Regarding the FAPA, this fund will support in priority projects which have an impact on business environment. Okay, in conclusion, we can say we have with JICA two major and complementary tools for co-financing: ACFA for sovereign operation and PSIF for non-sovereign operations. To start the discussion, we can contact EPSA focal point at the bank or at headquarters, JICA headquarters. For the PSIF, also we have here the contact for the private sector investment finance division at JICA headquarters. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mamadou, for the presentation on EPSA. Please, Mr. Boris and Mrs. Carol, could you take us through the non-sovereign operations in about 20 minutes maximum, please?
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The private sector development is widely recognized as an engine of sustainable and inclusive economic growth. The African Development Bank identifies, therefore, private sector development as one of its fundamental areas of focus to reduce poverty and support sustainable growth in Africa. So the presentation will introduce you to the private sector financing window. We'll give you an overview of the objective and guiding principles of our intervention in this sector, the main conditions and types of financing, the investment criteria, and examples of investments made. Let's start with a quick definition of non-sovereign operation. It's an operation that is not guaranteed by a state, This generally relates to private sector transactions, but it also covers public sector enterprises that are fully autonomous and can be run on a commercial basis. It also includes the financing of regional development finance institutions. NSO are extended on non-concessional financial terms generally. The bank has identified 3 key objectives that are mutually reinforcing: the improvement of the business climate, the development of social and economic infrastructure, and increasing access to reliable quality services, and the strengthening of private sector enterprises. And can we come back to the previous present? Thank you. Okay, so pillar 1 is the business enabling environment, and it focuses on activities such as identification of reforms, support of key reforms to simplify business processes, promote formalization, strengthen domestic force mobilization, facilitate trade and regional integration, etc. Pillar 2, the social and economic infrastructure, will focus on key enablers and assist regional member countries in their efforts to offer reliable and affordable electricity, transportation in the form of ports, airports, roads, and railways, water and sanitation, waste management, broadband, and mobile telecom services. It also includes education, health, and other social services. Pillar 3, which are productive enterprises, will focus on entrepreneurship development, the deepening and expanding of financial and capital markets through easier access to long-term financing, and by promoting local entrepreneurship and value chain development. Next slide, please. Thank you. So besides those 3 objectives, we have 9 principles that guide the bank's choices in terms of private sector transactions. The first one is ownership. We respect the rights of the individual regional member country to choose its approach in terms of private sector development and to set their investment priorities. The second one is responsibility. Clients are responsible for the success of the operation, including for the sound and timely implementation, the competent management throughout the project's life, honoring all financial obligations, commercial and financial success, and attaining the development results that has been agreed upon. Selectivity. So opportunities are identified based on areas of competitive advantage and our will to maximize impact and reach with our limited resources. Development outcomes and additionality. Our participation to a non-sovereign operation should provide value addition that other commercial investors cannot bring on their own, and will focus on maximizing development outcomes. The 5th principle is effective partnerships. We collaborate with various partners to develop private sector and catalyze co-financing. Our non-sovereign operation should reinforce markets by promoting open and fair competition. We ensure that all our projects comply with our environmental, social, and integrity and fiduciary and procurement safeguards. And finally, all our operations are made with the preservation of our financial strength and relevance to regional member countries in mind. So I will not let my colleague, Mr. Onpeji, to present the main conditions and types of financing and investment criteria. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol, and good morning, everyone. So next slide. Okay, so as my colleague mentioned earlier, the main objective of the African Development Bank non-sovereign operations is to help accelerate the development and the transformations of the African continent through various financial support mechanisms and products. And that intervention is subjected to 4 main conditions. First, the borrower must be a private enterprise or an eligible public sector enterprise. However, the borrower must be a private enterprise or eligible public enterprise registered in a regional member country of the bank. But there are a few exceptions to that condition, and that's pertain to private equity fund, which can now be registered in a non-regional member country as long as the bank investment in that fund is totally deployed for the benefit of the African continent. The second condition is that the operation to be financed must be financially sound to obtain a private funding. And the third condition is that the operation should result in a satisfactory development outcome, including creating or supporting private sector development in the country in which it will be implemented. The fourth condition is that it must be demonstrated that the bank will bring additionality, which could either be financial or non-financials. And finally, in addition to all those four conditions, the bank will also require the known objections from the country in which the operation will be implemented before extending financing to a non-sovereign operations. Next slide, please. Now, subject to the condition that I highlighted earlier, the bank can provide 2 types of financing which are deployed through a various type of instrument that you'll be learning about in the next presentations. So the first type of financing is corporate finance, which are extended to eligible enterprise in support of their various investment program. And the instrument that we use to deploy the corporate financing are usually senior and subordinated loan, line of credit and agency line when we are dealing, for instance, with financial institutions, or equity participation, and this usually pertain to regional development financial institution in which the banks invest directly. It could also be through credit or risk guarantee. Now, the second type of financing is the project financing, under which the bank provides finance to specific project promoted by an eligible public or private sector enterprise. And the instrument that we also use to deploy the project finance are similar to the one that I mentioned under the corporate financing. Next slide. Next one. So broadly speaking, every sector of the economy are eligible to the bank financing, and this include infrastructure related sectors such as energy, transport, or social sector, which include education, health, water and sanitation, and other sectors such as agriculture and agribusiness and financial sector. However, there are certain type of activity that do not qualify for the bank non-sovereign operations. And this include activity that are related to the trade or productions of weapons or ammunition, or activity that are deemed illegal under the host country law or regulations, or that are in contravention with the international convention and agreement. It also includes activity related to casino gambling. I will not go through the entire list here, but the list is publicly available on our website, and we can also share that with you at the end of this webinar. Next slide. Now, having talked about the main conditions, the eligible sector, and also the type of financing that the bank can provide, broadly speaking, the bank investment is guided by 4 main criteria. The first, the project to be financed must fit very well with the development objective and priority of the country or the region in which the project will be implemented. It must also be compatible with the bank's priority and area of interventions. And secondly, the project must be creditworthy, commercially viable, and financially sustainable, meaning that the project should have a solid prospect of being financially profitable and be able to generate adequate cash flow to meet its financial obligations, such as debt service payment in the case of a loan, and in the case of equity investment, for instance. The project should have a solid prospect to support dividend payment and yield satisfactory returns. So in addition to the strategic alignment, to the commercial viability, the financial sustainability, and the creditworthiness, the project must also demonstrate its ability to generate a wide range of development outcomes, which include, for instance, fiscal revenue for the country or the region in which the project will be implemented, job creations, and also some other very important cross-cutting development issues such as gender, climate change, and social impact, including the development of the private sector in the country or the region in which the project will be implemented. Now, in terms of the fourth investment criteria, which is the additionality, is covered the unique aspect of the African Development Bank involvement in terms of the value additions that the bank will bring to the project, and that cannot be filled by the client itself or by any commercial financier. The additionality usually can be financial additionality, such as the bank extending a longer tenure to a loan, or the bank providing a local currency financing. And with regard to non-financial additionality, it could be a political risk mitigations or improve the development outcome of the project. So I will stop here and allow my colleague Carol to walk you through quickly through the application process when one is applying for a non-sovereign, for a financing for a non-sovereign operations. And she will also provide you an overview of 2 examples of our non-sovereign operations in the education and in the water sector. Thank you.
So thank you, Boris. Oh, you have.
Oh, actually, sorry. Let me cover this one quickly. I'm sorry. So, in addition to the investment criteria that I mentioned earlier, the project must also adhere to procurement methods that are in line with best practice and that are also in line with well-established private sector procurement methods. And the project must also be environmentally and socially sound, and it must be free of any integrity-related risk. It must also be free of any ethical concern or any significant risk that might adversely impact the reputation of the bank. And this includes things such as like financing activity that are directly or indirectly related to terrorism or money laundering. So now I can let my colleague Carol walk you through the application process and give you an overview of 2 examples of non-sovereign operations. Thank you.
So thank you, Boris. All investment proposals must include the following preliminary information. So the description of the project, the sponsor's managerial and financial track record, so the background of the sponsor, the governance structure and management team, the cost estimates, including the amount requested from the bank, the key technical and environmental features, the feasibility indicators, the business climate and market prospects, and the implementation plan. So following this initial contact and preliminary assessment, the bank will probably proceed by requesting a detailed feasibility study, a business plan, and an environmental and social study, depending on the project, to determine whether to assess the project further. The feasibility study will demonstrate that the business concept is feasible. It will cover market analysis, financial viability, and operational issues. The business plan will contain detailed financial projections, business strategies, and information on how you will launch and develop the project. And finally, the environmental and social study will enable us to ensure that the project will benefit the local economy and that it will be environmentally and socially responsible, meeting our environmental and social standards, as well as those of the host country. You can send your funding request to the External Representation Office for Asia, which is your main point of entry, or alternatively, you can send it to private sector help desk at afdb.org. Next slide, please. So to recap, we will engage in non-sovereign operations that are well prepared, that have clear value addition by the bank, that are technically, economically, and financially sound, that are diligently managed, that adhere to high ethical norms, that are environmentally and socially sustainable, and that have solid prospects of generating significant development results within the regional member countries in which they are implemented. So to give you an example of such operation, we can mention the Afe Babalola University, the project which addressed the mismatch between academic programs and the demands of the labor market in Nigeria. The bank provided $40 million USD over 8 years, including a 3-year grace period. And the operation involved the construction of new facilities, including a 400-bed university hospital, an industrial research park, agribusiness facilities, and a mini hydroelectric power station. The additionality lens was divided by here, as private funding is pretty scarce in the social sector in general and the education sector in particular. So the project is also strategically aligned with 4 of our high fives. Next slide, please. Thank you. We can also mention the Kigali bulk water project, designed on a PPP basis between the government of Rwanda, the government water utility company, and the Kigali Water Limited. This is the first PPP operation of the bank in the water sector, and it showcased a significant demonstration effects, and it paved the way for similar future transactions, hopefully. So this brings us to the end of the presentation, and I would like to thank you for your kind attention. Our colleagues will now present in more detail the financial solutions of the bank. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Boris and Carol. You know, as you can see, the bank private sector window, the bank itself is a partner of choice when it comes to private sector operations in Africa. So we should be the conduit to the private sector. As you can see, we can accompany you to make sure that not only do you understand the business, but then we can also make sure that you are embedded in the operations that the bank itself undertake when it comes to private sector operations. Now, let me ask my colleagues, Nana, who is the officer in charge of the financial of the Client Solution Division, and Nema, who is the Chief Co-Financing and Syndication Officer, to run us through the financial products for private sector.
Okay, good morning or afternoon or evening, colleagues and participants. As Max mentioned, I'm going to be speaking about the bank's financial products. I think we've gotten a good background as to what the bank can offer, and I will be going a bit more into the details here. So just as a quick overview or recap, the bank group is made up of 3, excuse me, I'm getting feedback from interpretation. The bank is made up of 3 legally separate entities. The first being the African Development Bank, which is what really concerns the private sector. It's made up of 81 member countries, including all of the African countries, and has an authorized capital of $208 billion following our general capital increase that was closed last year. And this is the lending window of the bank that sources its funding for private sector projects, and is therefore the main source of private sector financing. We are able to raise resources on the capital markets by virtue of our AAA status, which gives us a very low cost of funding, which we're able to pass on to our private sector transactions. We do, however, have two other lending windows or legal entities that make up the group. The African Development Fund, which is the concessionary window that finances our low-income countries, and the Nigeria Trust Fund, which is let's say a co-financing vehicle that was set up by Nigeria to assist our other regional member countries with their developmental needs. Apologies. This slide communicates our credit policy. It's more pertaining to how we classify our regional member countries between middle income and low income. For the benefit of the private sector, as I mentioned before, the main financing window for private sector is the African Development Bank. So the country classification is not so relevant because we are open to financing private sector projects in any of our regional member countries. However, this classification does come into play, for example, when we talk about our guarantee instruments, which I'll get into a bit later in terms of determining how much risk exposure, for example, if we're covering political risk, we can take on for the benefit of a private sector project. But in general, we offer 7, financial products or areas of intervention. Obviously, the most well-known is loans. So we offer a multitude of loans, but for the private sector, the most important would be what we call the fixed spread loan, which I'll speak to shortly. But we also offer equity guarantee products, namely our partial risk guarantee and partial credit guarantee, as well as a host of derivative products to support transactions with interest rate swaps or cross-currency swaps to manage the debt that you are incurring on a proactively. We also offer trade finance as well as grants through technical assistance. Other MDBs, we pride ourselves on having provided equity to establish a number of affiliated partners such as Africa 50, the Currency Exchange, African Export-Import Bank, so that we can leverage our relationship with them in order to assist transactions that we may not be able to finance directly. So getting to private sector loans, in terms of eligibility, public sector companies and any entity without a sovereign guarantee is eligible for a private sector loan, and obviously all private sector companies or countries, the maturity is up to 15 years with a grace period of 5 years. We also offer a number of currencies for the private sector loan, including Japanese yen, but also local currencies as well, should the project require an African currency. We currently have 12 lending currencies that are available, which are communicated in the following slides. And as the previous speakers mentioned, the bank is always looking towards additionality and development outcomes when assessing whether we want to pursue a project. So as mentioned, we have 12 approved African lending currencies, and we are able to avail those currencies to private sector transactions through 4 funding mechanisms, either through a domestic bond issuance, through a derivative transaction physically, or where it's synthetically hedged. And obviously we can speak more to those 2 methodologies outside of this webinar, but just to let you know that those options are available. And then the 4th option is to simply get a loan from a local bank in the country where the currency is applicable. In terms of our guarantee products, as mentioned earlier, we have two. We have one that guarantees beneficiaries against political risks, and then the other guarantees against all risk. And obviously the reason that we do that is we know that for foreign investors, sometimes the risk perception for Africa is higher than it should be, and we are there to stand with you in your transactions in order to make you more comfortable by towards the project, or guaranteeing, in the case of debt financiers, guaranteeing the repayments of financing that's been provided. So these are specifics around the social risk guarantee. We cover everything such as currency and convertibility, political force majeure, and breach of contracts. And under the partial credit guarantee, I mentioned that it covers all risks, but specifically on portions of debt service with regards to private sector lenders, or lenders to a private sector transaction. I should also mention here that we recently launched a very innovative platform called the Co-Guarantee Platform, where we're working with other risk mitigation providers to avail as much risk mitigation as possible to transactions and to private sector clients, going beyond, and in this way, we're able to go beyond even what the bank might be able to do independently or individually. And this slide simply communicates some of the benefits of working with us, of which there are many, and I will allow you to go over those at your own leisure after the webinar when this presentation is shared. As well as this slide, which communicates some of the details go up to and the fees and other pricing elements of our guarantees. The next instrument I want to mention is equity. We tend to provide direct equity more so to transformational and multinational entities, specifically, especially in the financial intermediation space, because we feel like it's the best way for us to leverage our equity resources through these entities seen on the right-hand side. We are able to multiplier effects, but if you do in your transactions or in your, we would be open to that in accordance with the eligibility criteria and ownership and divestment approach that we have listed here on this slide. We also provide indirect equity, which is again our way of having a bit more leverage in our operations, and that we look to, and some of which are listed here, which are able to then go down to the grassroots level in order to invest in sections that might not be the most efficient for the bank to do directly. Next, we have our risk management products. So as mentioned, we are able to offer our clients a series of hedges to facilitate their proactive debt management. So we offer interest rate swaps, cross-currency swaps, commodity price swaps, and interest rate caps and collars. And obviously this is important when we're dealing with a continent that does have some high exposure to market risks. So as I said before, the bank is ready to assist any private sector sponsor in managing some of those exposures. The next category of product we have is trade finance. Under the trade finance program, we have 3 instruments. The first being the risk participation agreement, which is basically a risk sharing arrangements between banks to facilitate a portfolio of trade related transactions, of which the bank can cover up to 50% of commercial bank portfolio exposures of trade in Africa. We also offer lines of credit under this program, which facilitate import and export for the continent. Obviously, these lines of credit are of a shorter tenor and a revolving nature, but they are able to assist African countries to import certain machinery, commodities, and the like. And we also offer a soft commodity finance facility, which was created to support commodity aggregators in order to get the inputs that they need for farmers or other intermediaries in order to grow yields and facilitate trade and export of fur. Last colleague, Mr. Barry, and other speakers have already spoken to EPSA and a number of facilities that we have in the bank. We have a total of 40, and these provide capacity building and technical assistance grants or very concessionary loans to projects for preparation or pre-feasibility or training, or some of those soft elements that are required to make sure that the private sector project is financially viable for the long term. And you're more than welcome to look into those to see how they can support your transactions. So to close, I would just like to say, as Max has been stating throughout this webinar, that the bank is your partner of choice. We are very able to mobilize resources and offer blended finance options for private sector-led development on the continent. We offer a diversified financial product menu, and we also offer, through our public sector transactions, an enabling environment for private sector. We're open to strategic partnerships and receiving innovative and high quality deal flow, and look forward to working with all of you on this webinar very soon. Thank you, and back to Max, please.
Thank you, Nana. Nema, do you want to go over the syndication process very quickly, please?
Okay, so my colleagues before have talked to us about private sector and how the bank generally supports the private sector. I'll be focusing primarily on the loan product and how the bank works with other lenders when it comes to financing projects on the continent. So the bank has a loan product called loan syndications, whereby we partner with other lenders. Normally the bank uses this loan product when the bank has been mandated by a borrower to act as the lead arranger for the transaction. Now, why do we syndicate? Normally we would look towards syndicating when a borrower wants to deal primarily with 1 or 2 key lenders, as opposed to a whole group of lenders who might all be lending into the transaction. And in this particular case, the lead bank will coordinate all of the other banks. So, this minimizes transaction costs for the borrower because they only have to deal with one particular entity as they process the transaction. And participating banks can also, work behind the lead bank in this case. Typically, when a bank is mandated, it means that the borrower has confidence that the bank understands their business and also understands the context in which they work. So the other banks who are participating alongside the lead bank can get to learn more about the market in which they're operating, as well as benefit from any of the other benefits that the lead bank might be able to negotiate on their behalf. And finally, borrowers also benefit from new relationships. So let's say, for example, if the bank has relationships with banks in Japan, borrowers who are not exposed to banks in Japan can then now have this new relationship through this arrangement. So just to briefly go over why we as an institution like to do this. For one, it allows us to be able to better use our capital and also allows us to be able to spread our risk. By working with other lenders, we are minimizing our exposure to the transaction and allowing others to gain exposure. The bank also has what we call preferred creditor status, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. And through loan syndications, particularly through the use of the AB loans, the bank is able to share its benefits with the other lenders who co-lend with them. The bank's mandate as a development finance institution is to capitalize capital for development projects in Africa, and also to leverage on its balance sheet to attract private flows. And since this webinar is about working with the private sector, this is an instrument whereby the bank is very keen to be able to work with the private sector. I believe colleagues have mentioned about the huge financing requirements on the African continent. And the bank also has its own priorities and its own strategy. I believe that's also been mentioned by my colleagues, the high fives. These have a really huge financing requirement. And as you can see on the slide, it says about 170 billion. The bank on an annual basis can only do about 9. So in order for us to be able to meet this huge requirement, we need to be able to partner with others. And finally, also to increase our visibility and impact. The bank has been doing business since 1964, so we understand the continent, we understand the requirements. Being an African institution, we're best placed to be able to work with other entities. So just to briefly walk you through the AB loan, and this is an instrument that we use primarily with commercial banks or lenders who do not benefit from what we call the preferred creditor status. In this structure, the bank is the lender of record, and they're the one lender who the borrower deals with. So the bank negotiates a facility document with the borrower. Other lenders under this structure will come under the bank through what we call loan participation agreements. So the bank will be the only entity that deals with the lenders and also the only entity that deals with the borrower. So to leverage on the bank's capital investment to a single project, this is one of the key reasons why we do this, and also to facilitate, as I mentioned earlier, the entry of commercial financiers. Now, under the benefits that we provide through our preferred creditor status, we primarily mitigate specific risks, being currency inconvertibility and transferability. So a little bit more about the preferred creditor status. Okay, so the African Development Bank's loans have preferential access to foreign exchange in the event of a foreign exchange crisis in our regional member countries. So this status, which is more regarded as a gentleman's agreement, is actually embedded within our charter, and it mitigates against the risks of transfer and convertibility of foreign exchange. For public sector exposures, repayments to the bank generally take precedence, and generally takes precedence before other creditors in the event of a sovereign default. So this gives a very strong position vis-a-vis our regional member countries when it comes to servicing hard currency loans. So under the AB loan structure, participating banks benefit from this status, as well as other privileges and immunities that the bank benefits from, including non-payment of withholding tax. Another way in which we work with lenders when it comes to financing projects is through what we call parallel financing. And I believe one of my colleagues will be talking about a project whereby we co-lent with other lenders, including JBIC. Under this structure, we have a borrower and we have many different categories of lenders. You can have development finance institutions like ourselves, export credit agencies, or even commercial banks. And our relationship with the borrower is governed by what we call a common terms agreement. Each lender can have their own individual financing document, but they all have to be guided by the one document, which is called the common term agreement. So the bank typically works in this fashion when it deals with lenders who cannot come under their B loan. I won't go into details over the terms since they've been covered by other colleagues, and our presentations will also be shared on the webinar website. So just some select transactions, and colleagues have already mentioned, for example, Ghana Cocoa Board, where we work together with the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, but then there are other syndicated transactions where we've also worked with other Asian banks, including Japanese banks. So for example, Transnet, which is a state-owned entity in South Africa, dealing with logistics and transportation and infrastructure. We work there with Tokyo Mitsubishi Bank, SMBC, and Mizuho, to name a few. And also for Eskom, which is also another state-owned entity in South Africa, which generates power and distributes power. There we also work together with the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi, as well as Bank of China. I won't go into too much detail in terms of the co-financing facilities, but just to reiterate messages that were previously shared by colleagues. We have facilities together with Asian entities. My colleague Mamadou went into detail about our relationship with the Japanese government. I'll just briefly touch on our relationship with the Chinese government through the foreign exchange reserves of the People's Bank of China. We have a special fund where we do joint co-financing. We also have a special relationship with the European Union, whereby they provide us with grants and loans for which we can use to co-finance on both sovereign and non-sovereign operations. And then we also have relationships with the Islamic Development Bank to co-finance, mainly parallel co-financing. And finally, we have the Korea Economic Development Corporation Fund, again, also a fund that we use for parallel co-financing on the African continent. So that, in a nutshell, is how we partner with various lenders on various projects on the African continent. Over to you, Max.
Thank you very much, Nema, for a very good presentation. Before I turn it over to my colleague from the actual private sector, but let me maybe summarize a little bit what Nana and Nema had shared. As you can see, the bank provides a suite of financial products, from loans to guarantees to equity, to ensure that we address the needs that you have in supporting the private sector. So we can partner with you, as soon as we identify the needs and the challenges you may have in accessing business in Africa. The bank can definitely assist. One of the great products that we have also for Japanese investors is the guarantees, because we understand that some of you may not know Africa really well, so you may need a partner, a AAA rated entity like the African Development Bank, which, by the way, is the only AAA rated entity in Africa, to provide the guarantee that you need, meaning that to give you the comfort that you need in terms of providing investment in Africa. So we cover both political and credit risk. So if there is a project or that you would like to finance, the bank can definitely assist. We have also our loans, which are long-term loans, up to 15 years, as Nana said, for the private sector. That can also be utilized alongside yourself. And that leads me to the second part of the presentation where Nema spoke about the syndication part, where working with you, the bank doesn't have all the resources that we need to provide financing. So we will still continue to leverage on our rating, on our halo effect in Africa, to ensure that we attract yourselves as well as commercial banks or sponsors, but also others across the world, to ensure that we provide the financing that is needed to address the financing gap in Africa. Syndication is a very important part, same as co-financing. On the co-financing side, we can work alongside you to make sure that we have skin in the game, and then we both provide the financing that is required to ensure that the project are successful. In summary, we are here and available to not only provide the suites of products that we have, but also to develop innovative structures to make sure that we address your need. Now, let me ask my colleague from the NAO and NEMHO, Chief Investment Officer, Energy Financial Solution, and Senior Investment Officer, Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, to discuss very quickly in 20 minutes. We still will be running about 5 minutes, beyond the schedule, but I would ask your indulgence here, NAO and NEMHO, to really try to fit this in 20 minutes, and they will be speaking to you about opportunities and success stories of the private sector participation and project in energy sector in Africa. Mr. Nao and NEMHO.
Okay, thank you, Max, for the introduction. We are going to make a presentation, opportunity and success stories of private sector participation in energy sector of Africa. And we have to go through a little bit rapidly due to the 20 minutes of the limitation. And today we are going to talk about 4 different topics. One is who we are. The second is resources and energy market in Africa. Third is business opportunities for Japanese stakeholders. And fourth is successful cases by Japanese stakeholders. Okay, so number 1, who we are. This is about our energy complex. An official name is Power, Energy, Climate, and Green Growth Complex. It's established in 2015 to achieve a new deal on energy for Africa, which is our sector strategy, to provide energy access to over 600 million people who cannot have access to the electricity. It is aligned with one of our high fives. It's Light Up and Power Africa, which our colleagues have already explained before. Basically, our energy complex is a one-stop energy shop for the public sector and private sector, dealing with a transmission line, generation systems, off-grid and mini-grid, renewables and energy efficiency to a clean cooking. We also mobilize climate financing. We also do the technical assistance on policy and regulation. We also do the advisory service for the technical expertise to utilities for them to make a corporate efficiency. We also analyze power sector information and data. Our energy complex consists of 4 departments. Next, please.
Thank you. My name is Namo. Hello, everyone. So I'll just continue for a few slides. So my colleague now just gave an overview of our energy complex. And of course, we are offering a suite of financial products, as our colleague already mentioned, but we just wanted to highlight from the energy team perspective, we also offer additional support, for example, the more concessional risk capital, tapping into the climate finance, and also we bring the sector expertise, our in-house power engineers and our policy experts for the energy sector, and our teams based in the countries and the region. We all work together to structure a deal and bring the programs into fruition. So we want to highlight our roles, bringing sector expertise and also mitigating country risk by liaising with government as an honest broker. Our capital, the loans coming with a long-term maturity that's matching the project's lifetime, but it also offers the patient capital, such as an impact capital or equity investment. Of course, we'll talk more about it later. And we bring and we leverage our regional network of stakeholders, like the companies and the co-financiers across the continent. And in order to supplement our financial instruments, we offer the technical assistance, which is a very key instrument to bring projects into a more developed stage. We provide advisory services to the government to improve their policy and regulatory environment to support a power sector development. And also a lot of technical assistance is linked to the climate finance. So we want to promote a low carbon and climate resilience development, and energy, of course, is a very key sector to achieve the low carbon development. Some of the special funds that we are hosting and the funds that are only targeting the energy and climate sector, for example, the Facility for Energy Inclusion, we'll talk more about it later. The Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa 2.0, CEFA, it is actually a very important fund that we are mobilizing, supported by donors. Key focus area includes the green base load, such as the battery storage with renewable energy, energy efficiency, and the green mini grid. And it offers a grant to the project developers, the grant to support feasibility studies, environment, social impact assessment, and etc. And it also offers a concessional financing and even the result-based financing grant in some cases. So if you are a power sector project developer, I would really encourage you to take a look more at a Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa and its window to support the project preparation. Below there, Green Climate Fund, Climate Investment Funds, and Global Environment Facilities are the external climate funds that African Development Bank work together to bring the resources at the concessional term, mostly to support the climate resilience and low carbon development. And we'll share more examples later. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to talk about resources and energy market in Africa. Africa is rich in energy resources. As you can look at the slide, there's a potential generation capacity of 10 trillion watt of solar PV, 110 gigawatt of wind, 350 gigawatt of hydroelectric, and 15 gigawatt of geothermal. When it comes to the gas, proved reserved gas is 510 trillion cubic feet in 2018. But this volume is going to expected to grow very rapidly due to the recent gas discoveries in Africa. Actually, 40% of the global gas discoveries between 2011 to 2018 are from Africa. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is regarding electricity generation in Africa by resources from 2018 to 2040. And you can see the power generation is going to increase more than double by 2040. If you look at the bar graph to the top on the right side, renewables through solar PV, geothermal, wind, and hydro play a leading role in expanding generation, capitalizing on the rich natural resources in Africa and falling technology costs. If you look at the scaling solar program in Ethiopia, the sponsor made a contract based on 2.5 cents US dollar by kilowatt hour. If we compare it with the average cost of generation, which is approximately 18 cents, we can find how economical that tariff of scalar solar program. In the middle of the bar graph, on the middle of the bar graph, natural gas remains a strong option for generation. Natural gas can help satisfy the growing appetite for baseload electricity and complement the rapid expansion of renewables. And if you look at the bottom, there's no increase for coal is expected due to the climate concerns. Okay, we're going to talk about business opportunities for Japanese stakeholders. I'm going to talk about geothermal opportunities for public sector and also IPPs. Geothermal opportunity will be promoted by most of the East African countries to meet their mitigation objective under the nationally determined contribution, NDCs. Opportunities exist in Djibouti, Uganda, Tanzania, Comoro, in addition to Kenya and Ethiopia, and all these countries have provided a geothermal solution as a mitigation objective under NDCs. There's a strong initiative by Japanese on public financing scheme. 12 out of 60 turbines in Olkaria 1 to 5 in Kenya have been provided by Japanese companies, namely Mitsubishi Corporation, MHPS, and Toyota Tsusho, Toshiba. Olkaria 1, Unit 6 is now being constructed by Marubeni and Fuji. JICA has been involved as a financier in Olkaria project since 2010. And when we talk about IPP trend and opportunity for Japanese, Historically speaking, there's a limited opportunity for IPPs because Olkaria 3 is the only IPP in this continent operated by OMA, which is an Israeli company. But the situation is going to change because we are expecting financial close. It's going to happen, one company or two companies from three IPPs, namely Quantum, Socian, and OMA. And I understand that Japanese manufacturer are negotiating with these three IPPs. Olkaria 6, Kengen is going to process a winner from 5 group bidders. And I understand that the 4 Japanese companies are involved in this 5 group bidders. Olkaria 7, exploration is currently going on. This is going to be a future IPP. In Ethiopia, Turumoe and Korbeti PPA have been already signed by the sponsors, and probably EPC package, including turbine and the financing package for the debt, is going to be expected within 1 year, or could be a little bit more after the exploration activity has been going on for some time. Okay, thank you. Next. Okay, I'm going to talk about our roles in Menengai geothermal IPP, and this is a little bit complex diagram, but we broke into 5 roles for AfDB to explain. We have already mobilized and provided $25 million from climate investment funds. That's number 1. Secondly, we have already provided $120 million from AfDB's own financing. And number 1 and number 2, both we did it through AfDB's public sector of the window. And this is about exploration stage, and the exploration has been completed. There's enough steam for the IPP to make a generate electricity. And if you look at the right side, number 3 to the bottom, we are going to provide a partial risk guarantee to IPPs to cover obligation of KPLC, which is off-taker, and GDC, which is steam provider, for 3 months of IPP's revenue. If you look at number 4, this is a future and a very coming future. We are going to provide AfDB's debt financing to IPP. We are able to provide up to the 1/3 of the total project cost. And number 5, we are going to mobilize climate finance, which is concessional loan, to IPPs. Both 4 and 5 will be done through AfDB's private sector window. Okay, next please. Okay, so I'm going to talk about gas opportunities. Africa will become a major player in natural gas market as a consumer, producer, and exporter, driven by the newly discovered gas field in Mozambique, Tanzania, Egypt, Mauritania, and Senegal, and South Africa. Opportunity exists across the whole gas value chains for Japanese stakeholders, from LNG, liquefied natural gas, floating LNG, LNG carrier, FSRU, FSU, generation plants, and etc. And we have picked some of the gas projects already promoted by Japanese. Mitsui and Marubeni already have shares in Equatorial Guinea LNG project. JGC is an EPC contractor for Mozambique Coral South floating LNG. JGC is EPC contractor for Mozambique Area 4 LNG as well. And when it comes to the gas to power project promoted by Japanese, Marubeni has 40% of the share of Tunisia Qatar Power, which is IPP. Sumitomo has 28% of the share of the Ghana Sempower Generation, which is also IPP. Sumitomo is closely monitoring EPC process as well. Mitsui is an EPC contractor for Ghana Takoradi 2 project. And Sumitomo MHPS and Toshiba is EPC consortium for Tanzania Kinyerezi 2 project. And Sumitomo and IHI is EPC consortium for Mozambique Maputo project. And all these Japanese companies have provided combined cycle for these projects. Okay.
Sure. Just to continue with now on the renewable energy side, of course, geothermal was part of the renewable energy, but the big trend that we observe in Africa is the renewable energy IPP procurement, especially and for the solar PV programs, and also including technologies such as mini hydro, etc. The recent trend is started from South Africa. Renewable energy IPP procurement program has been successful over multiple rounds, and now this similar scheme is being replicated by World Bank IFC supported scaling solar. In Zambia, Senegal, Madagascar, Ethiopia, some projects are already launched and some are currently rolled out. GetFit program is KfW supported. KfW is a German development bank. It's been successful in Uganda and is currently under implementation in Zambia. And we also see similar trends in other countries, Egypt and Tunisia. So we want to highlight that now the countries are looking more into the organized procurement with a streamlined process and the documentation rather than the individual bilateral negotiation of the renewable energy projects. So this is an emerging trend. Another big trend that we will see more in the future is the battery storage, of course. Yet this is mostly delivered in the public sector program. South Africa, ESCOM's battery storage projects co-financed with the World Bank. There are projects that we are supporting closely, the utility scale battery storage by the regional power pool, for example, the West Africa Power Pool, WAP. So we are expected to see more of this project in support of the green baseload. So I think this is something that all the investors can keep an eye on. To highlight, we are working with the Green Climate Fund to support the projects selected out of the GetFit program in Zambia to finance up to 100 megawatt solar or mini hydro projects. So that is the little box down for the highlight of our case. The facility for energy inclusion, and the next slide is about mini grid. So here we want to talk about opportunities for decentralized energy solutions. This hasn't been our traditional focus due to its small size, but also this is really a business opportunity and the business model that has been started very recently, but is growing very fast. And we are really keen to support more of these projects because this contributes directly to the energy access in the rural area. Facility for Energy Inclusion is a debt financing fund that African Development Bank has sponsored to support either small-scale IPPs at the on-grid scale or the off-grid solar home system companies that are supported by pay-as-you-go mobile money technologies. So these two funds, the pay on-grid and off-grid, they are already operational and has been making investment. For example, example one, B-Box Rwanda, $8 million loan for the consumer inventory and consumer receivables financing. Sun Culture Kenya, so that's another financing case that is supported by Facility for Energy Inclusion. This is the fund based in Nairobi, so you can also check from the website. Another focus area, the mini grids. This is really an emerging opportunity. A lot of private sector players are entering in, still requiring support of more concessional resources, such as the result-based financing grant. But African Development Bank is really looking to support more of these opportunities, and we will work with the government to streamline the policy and regulatory process, and also to support directly the companies that are in need of the financing. We can offer the senior loans. For example, we are structuring a project in DR Congo, but we would be able to also support mini grids through a grant or reimbursable grant instruments offered from Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa that's mentioned earlier. So back to you. No, Shige.
Okay, so this is the last topic about successful case by Japanese stakeholders. There's only one successful case we're going to present, which is Mozambique LNG project. And this is an exemplary project linking between Africa and Japan in terms of the trading, investment, and financing. and technology, contributing the development in Mozambique and southern part of Africa. There's a huge visibility for Japanese stakeholders. About 30% of the LNG will be supplied to JERA, Tokyo Gas, and Tokyo Electric Power. Mitsui and JOGMEC has 20% of the share of the concessionaire. This is financed by JBIC for $3 billion, as well as commercial banks, 3 Japanese mega banks, MFG, Mizuho, SMBC, and other commercial banks covered by Nexus Loan Insurance for $2 billion. About shipping, NYK, MOL, and K Lines, actually, I understand it's negotiation to operate LNG vessel through a separate financing scheme. When it comes to the AfDB's financing, we are going to provide $400 million US, and the total project cost is more than 20 billion, as Mr. Hanaji introduced about this project. Our role is, because we are the only DFI participation, political mitigation, our role is required for the lenders and also sponsors. Because of our close relationship with the Mozambique government, they are our shareholder. And we are going to provide technical assistance to enhance local content and governance as well. And after this presentation, we are honored to receive comments from Deputy Governor of JBIC, Mr. Hayashi, on this Mozambique LNG area project. And let us appreciate for the Deputy Governor, as well as the entire JBIC and all Japanese stakeholders for this opportunity and sincere collaboration with AfDB. Okay, with this, we end our presentation. We have covered who we are, resources and energy market in Africa, business opportunities for Japanese stakeholders, successful cases for Japanese stakeholders. So we're really looking forward having a discussion for future investment from Japan for the development of Africa. Thank you very much. Back to you, Max. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nao and Namho. Thank you. Now, let me ask Mr. Hayashi, Deputy Governor for Japan Bank for International Cooperation, to provide JBIC's approach and operations in Africa. Mr. Hayashi?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you very well, and we can see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Please allow me to speak in Japanese, as our main audience is Japanese business people. 皆さん、こんにちは。国際協力銀行 JBIC の林でございます。ご参加の多くの方は、我々 JBIC とお取引があると存じます。この場を借りて感謝申し上げたいと思います。他方、まだ残念ながらお取引がない、あるいは我々の努力不足で JBIC のことをご存じないという方もいらっしゃるかもしれません。JBIC は日本企業の輸出入や投資などの海外活動を金融面で支える国の機関でございます。皆さんの海外での企業活動を応援すればするほど JBIC の業績も上がり、国の財政にも貢献でき、また世界の中での日本のプレゼンスを高めることができます。そこで本日はお願いして時間を頂戴しております。アフリカ開発銀行はアフリカにおいて JBIC の最も重要なパートナーです。先ほどご紹介がございましたモザンビークの LNG プロジェクトですけれども、我々も30億ドルの融資を約束しております。ご紹介いただきましたようにですね、木下さんからアフリカ会議の融資額というのは実は我々よりかなり少ないんですけれども、でもやっぱりアフリカ会議というのは不可欠の存在なんですね。LNG を輸出して得られた収入が誰かのスイスに持っている口座に消えたり、あるいはそういうことをしないでですね、モザンビークの国民のために使われるようにするために、あるいはまた大統領や大臣が変わりましたとか、法律が改正されましたとかいう時にも安心してプロジェクトを進めていくためには、どうしてもアフリカ会議にいてもらわないと困るんですね。JBIC というと、LNG のような大型の資源とかインフラのプロジェクトばかりやっていると思われがちなんですけれども、そうではありません。東南アジアを中心に中堅中小企業の海外展開を支援するために、 数億円から数千万円、場合によっては数百万円の融資もさせていただいております。私どもの名刺にはですね、こうやって日本の力を世界のためにというふうに書いてあるんですけれども、これはそういう意味でございます。アフリカでもこれまで石炭火力発電のプロジェクトなんかもやってきましたけれども、今や最新鋭の超長臨界発電とかでも中国企業にコスト面では負けてしまいます。効か不幸かといえば、私はそれは残念なことではなくて、我々に転換を促しているんだと考えています。クリーンな電源ですね。風力発電とか地熱発電、あるいはご紹介がありましたミニグリッドとかシェアリングとか電力使用の効率化とか、こういった分野で多くの日本企業が優れた技術とか実績を持っていらっしゃいます。金額が少ないんじゃないかとか、今までにないスキームだからといって、我々に相談することに二の足を踏まれる方もいらっしゃいますかもしれませんけれども、ご安心ください。我々政府機関ですので、金額が少なくても、あるいは手間がかかってもですね、社会的にインパクトのある事業、環境面でイノベーションがあるやつ、そういうのにはむしろ喜んで取り組んでいきます。融資のみならず出資であっても、リスクがより大きい案件でも皆さんと一緒に答えを見つけていきます。アフリカというと何といっても中国企業のプレゼンスが圧倒的ですけれども、トルコの企業とかインドとかの企業の中には、自分たちはアフリカで経験が豊富だけれども、ぜひ技術があって信頼できる日本企業にパートナーになってほしいというところもたくさんあるわけであります。私ども JBIC はアフリカ開発銀行をはじめとして、トルコやインドの輸出入銀行もそうですし、海外のさまざまなパートナーとの長年にわたるネットワークがございます。このネットワークを生かして皆さんのアフリカでのビジネス展開にお役に立ちたいと考えています。ぜひ我々と一緒にアフリカでのビジネスを実現していきましょう。本日は貴重な機会をありがとうございました。Thank you very, very much, everyone.
Thank you so very much for this very concise presentation of JBIC's business in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this brings us to the end of the presentations. Now, there has been some questions that have been asked, and most of them have been answered. But I will just I see one or two that are yet to be answered. The first question being, does the current African business model, which depends on the production and export of primary commodities, promote industrialization in Africa, and why? This is a question from Mr. Haji. No, I think that the export does not promote industrialization in Africa, and this is the story actually that we would like to change. The aim of the African Development Bank is to ensure that transformation of those commodities happen in Africa. And that's why if you look at the high five, one of the pillar of the high five, which is industrialize Africa, was all about making sure that we build the industries in Africa, that we transform the commodities that we produce to ensure that we promote industrialization. So that is, like I said, the story that we would like to change, and we have a full department around industrialization, and we can easily put you in touch with our colleagues there to ensure that you have all the information that you need about industrialization. The second question, still from Mr. Haji, for Africa to promote its PPP, its private-public partnership, who should act first? Is it the government or the private sector? I think I can also answer that question by saying that it can be either. Most likely, we've seen that this is coming from, at least to us, from the private sector, but most of the projects are initiated, of course, by government because they are part of their their development plan. And for us as well, for the African Development Bank, we have what we call a country strategy paper, where we discuss all the some of the projects that the bank will be involved in general. Here I'm talking about the involvement of the African Development Bank, but in general, government have their development plan where they have project that they would like to sort of execute, and through that the private sector comes in. But we've seen also instances where the private sector have initiated this with the government, and bringing us into the plan so that we can provide the necessary financing. But regardless who initiated, the important thing for the African Development Bank is to ensure that those projects happen on the continent, and then our role will be to facilitate the project, to ensure that we bring the partners that are needed to finance those projects, and to follow up and to ensure that the even follow after the execution, the supervision happen, and the project is commercially viable. Let me see. I think that how does the bank see the outlook for the business environment in Africa in the COVID-19 environment? Maybe I can ask Mr. Hanajiri to provide some inputs there.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark-san. Yeah, it's really excellent question, and yeah, partly it is the unknown future thing, because as I stated, the upcoming prospect is very uncertain because of the significance of short-term and the long-term effect of the COVID-19 situation. And at the same time, this unprecedented circumstances also generating some opportunity for the future for the business. So yes, we have the pros and cons and the good news and bad news. So it's really a good question to answer, difficult question to answer. But at the same time, maybe you are thinking about the business environment, I mean the atmosphere for the business, which might dramatically change. One good example is the digitalization, digital revolution. In the midst of this era, this very difficult era, what we are doing right now is the connecting the African continent and East Asia, and holding the webinar. So it's the good example that before the COVID, we are from time to time held a physical gathering events, but it is very it was difficult at sometimes to get availability from the headquarters colleagues. So this is the very, how can I say, very few good things occurred due to the COVID situation. So yeah, I'd like to stop here, but yeah, it's a good question, and maybe the future is our variable. So we should change the future for the good direction. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanijeri. The next question, very quickly: how do we get in touch with your industrialization department? I will ask Mr. Takushiji to reach out to you directly. My colleague will reach out to you to put you in touch with Nawa and Nemho from our energy department, so that they can provide further information on that. Is there a platform for B2B opportunities outside of webinar? Yes, I think that the bank itself, I think, is a platform for B2B opportunities. You have the Asian Representation Office, you have the Africa Investment Forum, and you have our private sector department, you have our syndication and co-financing department as well. All of these are a definite sort of to make it larger platform for B2B opportunities. But more formally, though, you have the Africa Investment Forum, which Mr. Hadijari spoke about. Then that we can certainly will be a good venue for B2B opportunities. But again, we can reach out to you to put you in direct touch with the bank, and also to provide information on those B2B opportunities. Is there any ongoing project in Nigeria? Yes, Ms. Ajala, there are many ongoing projects in Nigeria and across Africa. The bank private sector, as Nana had said earlier, covers all 54 countries, and we do have operations in almost all of the 54 African countries. I think I will, for the sake of time, I think that we will we'll wrap up the session. There are a few questions that I'm seeing that we can provide answers to. My colleague will certainly provide the Q&A directly to you. So just to wrap up, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for taking the time to participate in this very important webinar. We hope that it has been enlightening to you, in the sense that it provided information that you needed to see the bank's capabilities and what the bank can provide to assist private sector development in Africa, and to partner with Japanese companies to ensure that their transition into Africa is very smooth. That is our objective. That is our role. We are AAA rated. We get up every morning to ensure that development happens in Africa. So, and Japan being a partner of choice for the African Development Bank, and this has been sort of tested through the EPSA for the EPSA initiative in general that the bank has provided. We do remain available to discuss any project that you have, any product we have, any initiative that you have, so that we ensure that we can build a stronger relationship amongst ourselves. Your key contact, I think you have a representation office in Japan that is led by our director, Mr. Hanijeri, and they will be your focal point in to making sure that your requests are taken on board and processed internally in the bank with a very high diligence. With those words of thank you, I would like to close the session, and we will revert back, as I said, on the remaining Q&A. Thank you so very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and have a lovely evening for people in Japan, and good day for people in Abidjan and elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Max. So I'd like to provide a few housekeeping announcements before close. First, the presentation material of this webinar will be uploaded on the website of the bank and Asia External Representation Office within a few days. So please visit our website and find download links of the materials later. And second, announcement about business opportunity seminar. Joseph, can you show the screen quickly? The African Development Bank will hold its second virtual business opportunity seminar through the internet basis on 13th and 14th October, which will provide an overview of the bank group policies and operations, including procurement rules and procedures, and ongoing and future country activities. And the further information will be available and on the bank's website, and soon announced on the national website as well. Yes, you can see the announcement which is available on the bank's website, and which will be shortly available on our Asian External Representation Office in Asian language. So I hope we can see you there. And now I would like to close the seminar. And I thank all participants again. So goodbye, and have a nice evening in Tokyo, and have a nice day in Abidjan. Thank you very much.